were already proving with archaeological evidence that everything that was written about this temple was wrong.
History just cracked open one of its most guarded secrets. For more than 2,000 years, Cleopatra's final resting place has been the greatest missing chapter of the ancient world. Empires rose and fell, deserts shifted, and countless explorers searched. Yet her tomb remained untouched, until now. Deep beneath Egypt's sands, archaeologists have entered a sealed chamber many believed would never be found. And what they uncovered wasn't just gold or statues. It was something that challenges everything we thought we knew about Cleopatra, her final days, and the power she may have taken to the grave. Inside the darkness, symbols appeared where none should exist. Objects were positioned with unsettling precision. And one discovery has experts quietly admitting this tomb was designed to send a message across time, one we were never meant to read. Before we reveal exactly what was found and why historians are stunned, take a second to like and subscribe, because once you hear what lay inside Cleopatra's lost tomb, history will never look the same again. The mystery begins. For more than 2,000 years, Cleopatra VII has remained one of history's most studied rulers. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, a strategist who faced Rome, ruled with intelligence, and built an image powerful enough to survive centuries of retelling. Yet one part of her story has remained unresolved. Roman accounts describe her burial as befitting a queen, but none reveal where it took place. For archaeologists, that absence became more than a mystery. It became an obsession that spanned generations. Ancient Egyptian priests left behind cryptic descriptions of her final rites. They wrote that she was a bride, returning to Osiris, and that her union was unseen by men. Historians have debated these phrases for centuries. Some think the priests were describing a secret ritual performed deep within a sanctuary. Others believe the words were deliberate instructions meant to hide her body forever. Each new expedition claimed to be close to the truth, but every lead collapsed into speculation. The discovery of the anomaly. In 1972, a Soviet seismic crew was running ground tests near Lake Mariut, a shallow saltwater lake southwest of Alexandria, Egypt. Officially, they were searching for oil, but beneath the limestone, their instruments began detecting something unexpected, a slow, repeating vibration. It wasn't strong enough to be machinery, and it was far too regular to be a natural earthquake. People living nearby gave the area a name, Ab al-Nafas, the place that breathes. The scientists logged the readings and moved on. The signals were recorded, filed away, and never examined again. When the project wrapped up, the data disappeared into archives and was quietly forgotten. There were practical reasons for the silence. Funding dried up. Political tensions escalated. Research priorities changed. In the middle of the Cold War, no one had time or interest for a strange, pulsing rhythm buried under Egyptian sand. For nearly 30 years, the anomaly sat untouched, waiting. That changed in the early 2000s. New satellite surveys targeted the same limestone ridge, and what they revealed was unsettling. Beneath the surface were geometric formations, sharp, symmetrical shapes that nature doesn't usually create. Thermal and radar scans showed these structures extended several meters underground. Analysts suggested they could be remnants of an artificial complex, intentionally buried. Skeptics blamed imaging distortion. Others weren't convinced. When researchers mapped the formations onto a digital grid, a larger pattern emerged. The outline resembled an ankh, the ancient Egyptian symbol of life. It wasn't carved into stone. It only existed in the data itself, invisible to the naked eye. Further reports hinted that the patterns stretched toward a plateau historically linked to the goddess Isis. Cleopatra famously referred to herself as the living embodiment of Isis, and that connection reignited a long-dormant debate. By this point, the search had changed. This was no longer a romantic hunt for a lost queen. It had become a scientific inquiry. Satellite readings detected unusual heat signatures below the sand, while soil samples revealed traces of ancient plaster and resin, materials rarely found in untouched desert ground. A legend was turning into an operation. Within months, Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities approved a ground expedition to investigate the site firsthand. What none of them could have anticipated was this. When they arrived, the desert itself began to move. The desert that moved. Weeks after the ministry approved the ground mission, a joint team of expert scientists, archaeologists, and engineers arrived at the coordinates west of Lake Marriott. Within hours of setting up the monitoring equipment, something happened that no one could explain. The sensors began to register a slow, steady vibration deep underground. The readings repeated every 42 seconds, perfectly timed. At first, the researchers thought it was an error. They replaced the equipment, recalibrated the sensors, and even checked for nearby construction. The pattern remained. Every 42 seconds, the same pulse returned. It was not a glitch. It was coming from the Earth itself. When the data was reviewed, someone pointed out a disturbing detail. In Egyptian belief, the number 42 held sacred meaning. It symbolized the 42 judges who decided the fate of souls in the afterlife. The connection was enough to make some of the team uneasy. A few joked about coincidence, but others began to wonder what kind of natural force could beat with such precision. To understand the phenomenon, the team began scanning the ridge at night using thermal imaging. The results were unexpected. Beneath the dunes, streaks of residual heat formed curved shapes, bending and reconnecting like corridors. Drone surveys the next morning showed faint ridges tracing those same lines. When plotted together, the formations created a vast rectangular layout. The proportions were almost identical to temple designs from Cleopatra's time. Core samples were taken to verify the readings. The upper layers of sand appeared normal, but the deeper sections contained fragments of plaster and traces of bitumen. These were not natural materials. They were sealing agents used in ancient Egypt to protect royal or sacred chambers. The discovery sparked immediate debate. Some believed the team had finally uncovered a buried complex. Others argued the results could have been caused by soil contamination or random geological patterns, a coincidence rather than proof of human construction. Local villagers warned the team that disturbing the earth would wake what sleeps below. Most of the scientists dismissed the warnings, but that confidence vanished after what happened next. One night, security cameras captured the sand itself moving. The footage showed faint ripples spreading across the surface in the same rhythm as the underground pulse. It was not wind, and it was not an illusion. The pattern was exact. Workers who saw the recording refused to sleep near the ridge. Over the next few days, the tremors grew stronger. The project stalled as fear spread through the camp. The Ministry of Antiquities intervened, ordering a controlled excavation under the supervision of Dr. Kathleen Martinez, a respected archaeologist known for her studies of Cleopatra's burial sites. When she arrived, she reviewed the recordings in silence. Her only comment was brief. "If this is what I think it is, we are standing above something she wanted us to find." The excavation began at dawn. By the third day, the desert began to crack and shift. Beneath the collapsing sand, stone appeared, smooth, carved, and ancient. It was the first visible proof that something built by human hands had survived beneath that ground, untouched for more than 2,000 years. The temple that spoke in 2 languages. At first glance, the site seemed unremarkable, just another collapsed foundation from Egypt's later dynastic period. But as the dust cleared and the stone walls came into view, the carvings told a very different story. The inscriptions identified the structure as Taposiris Magna, meaning the Great Tomb of Osiris. For the excavation team, that single name changed the meaning of everything beneath their feet. In ancient Egyptian belief, Osiris was the god of resurrection, ruler of the underworld, and the one who granted eternal life after death. A temple dedicated to him was not ordinary ground. It was sacred and possibly royal. For decades, some historians had theorized that Cleopatra may have chosen this very region as her burial place. She openly portrayed herself as the living embodiment of Isis, the wife of Osiris, to be laid to rest beside him inside a temple devoted to rebirth would have bound her death to divine immortality. The temple sat roughly 45 kilometers from Alexandria's coast, exactly where ancient records placed Cleopatra during her final days. The site was littered with fallen columns and the remains of towering stone gateways that once marked its entrance. Despite centuries of erosion, the inner walls still carried clear, deliberate carvings. When researchers examined them under artificial light, something unexpected stood out. The inscriptions were written in 2 languages. Egyptian hieroglyphs appeared alongside ancient Greek text, carved with equal precision and care. That detail stunned the team. Egyptian temples almost never blended languages, especially not in sacred spaces. Dr. Kathleen Martinez immediately understood the significance. Cleopatra ruled at the intersection of 2 worlds, the Greek-speaking elite who governed Egypt and the Egyptian priesthood that protected its spiritual traditions. The presence of both languages suggested direct royal approval. According to Martinez, the temple reflected Cleopatra herself, part Hellenistic ruler, part Egyptian goddess. Discoveries around the site deepened the mystery. Coins stamped with Cleopatra's likeness were uncovered near statues of Isis holding a falcon, a symbol of renewal and rebirth. Chemical analysis of the altar revealed traces of blue lotus resin and bitumen, substances traditionally used in royal embalming rituals. Witnesses later reported that the workers stood silently, aware they were handling objects untouched for more than 2 millennia. Then the instruments began to react. Ground sensors detected a low-frequency hum rising from deep beneath the limestone. The sound was below human hearing, but it appeared on the monitors as slow, repeating waves. Each pulse arrived every 42 seconds, the same rhythm recorded weeks earlier in the desert. Engineers tested for interference. None was found. The signal remained. The temple was no longer inert stone. It was producing a measurable vibration, as if something buried below was communicating through the rock itself. Field notes later recorded that several workers claimed they could feel a faint tremor beneath their boots. With every scan, the vibration intensified. The data pointed downward, beneath the foundations of Taposiris Magna. Driven by equal parts curiosity and unease, the team chose to follow the signal into the bedrock. What they uncovered next would later be known as the Impossible Tunnel, the corridor of rebirth. The Impossible Tunnel, the hum beneath Taposiris Magna, grew stronger with every scan. The team traced it to a layer of limestone, deep under the temple floor. When ground-penetrating radar was used, the image that appeared on the monitors made the room falls silent. Beneath the sanctuary was a tunnel carved through solid rock, straight, smooth, and perfectly level for over a kilometer. Even modern engineers would have struggled to achieve that kind of precision. At first, the researchers thought the readings were wrong, but when a small camera was lowered through a narrow borehole, the feed confirmed it. The lens revealed a corridor with curved ceilings and walls polished like glass. It looked man-made, yet it showed no tool marks, no signs of collapse, no cracks from time or pressure. Someone thousands of years ago had created it and then sealed it perfectly. When Martinez reviewed the images, she noticed something repeating along the walls. Carvings in both Greek and Egyptian formed the same phrase again and again. Ankre, which means life renewed. She suggested the tunnel represented a ritual passage, a path designed to guide the dead through resurrection. The team drilled deeper, following the signal to what appeared to be a sealed chamber. The scanners showed a circular cavity ahead, roughly 20 meters wide, with a temperature higher than the rock around it, as if the stone itself had once been burned from within. They began cutting through the final wall. The sound that followed wasn't the crack of stone, but something heavier, lower, a vibration that could be felt in the chest. When the barrier finally gave way, a blast of air escaped, sharp and cold. It carried the scent of resin and metal, like something ancient that had been trapped for centuries. The dust cleared, and the team shone their lights inside. What they saw was not a simple tomb. The walls were covered in a black, glassy layer that reflected their lights. It looked less like carved stone and more like rock that had been melted by fire. When the team lifted their lights toward the ceiling, they saw hundreds of tiny blue stones pressed into the surface. Later, analysis confirmed they were made from a mineral called lapis lazuli, a rare stone once used in royal tombs. The pieces had been arranged to form patterns of stars, creating scenes that showed the goddess Isis standing over the body of Osiris. Her hands were raised as beams of light connected her to the stars above him. The ceiling was not just decoration. It was a story carved in stone, showing the moment the gods brought life back from death. But the warnings carved into the walls told another story. In both Greek and Egyptian, the same line repeated again and again. Disturb the union, and the balance shall break. Near the floor, half hidden under soot, another message appeared. Blood shall drip from the left eye down. No one wanted to read it aloud. Some thought it was an offering ritual. Others thought it was a curse. Either way, the room grew quiet. Everywhere they looked, there were signs of careful sealing. Veins of mercury and lead ran through the plaster. The air smelled faintly of resin. Broken jars lined the corners, and beneath one column, a small golden scarab was found, engraved with a prayer, "Bind the soul to its body." Martinez studied it in silence before saying that this chamber was not built to display the dead. It was built to contain them. At the center stood a raised platform of fused stone. Two biers sat side by side, their surfaces glazed as if burned by intense heat. Between them rested a bronze cylinder about the length of a forearm, etched with spirals that shimmered under the light. One of the researchers swore he saw the outline of a tear carved into the metal, exactly where the wall had warned of blood falling from the left eye. As Martinez approached, the floor trembled. The pulse that had haunted their readings for weeks was now so strong that it could be felt through their boots. The air pressed against their chests, and some of the team backed away. Martinez ordered everyone to stop digging and start safety tests. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "This isn't just a tomb," she said quietly. It's responding to us. They moved to the edge of the hall and waited, but the readings kept rising. The pulse quickened, as though something beneath the floor had awakened, something that had been waiting for this moment. The black sarcophagus. When the final barrier cracked open, the room fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. The air that escaped from the chamber hit them like a wave. It smelled of resin, ammonia, and something older, something that burned the throat and stung the eyes. A few workers stepped back, covering their mouths with cloth, but it was too late. The chemical readings later showed dangerously high levels of toxic gas trapped inside for nearly 2,000 years. What should have been a triumph of archaeology felt like an accident that should never have happened. At the center of the chamber stood the sarcophagus. It was unlike anything anyone had seen before. Carved from a single block of black granite, it shimmered under the floodlights with an oily reflection. The lid itself weighed several tons, and the edges were sealed with a hardened mixture of resin and lead. Every movement of the crane echoed through the hall as the team prepared to lift it. When the lid finally shifted, a rush of warm air poured out. It was several degrees hotter inside the sarcophagus than the surrounding room. Martinez immediately noticed the temperature difference and called for a scan. The heat was coming from within. Everyone expected the remains inside to be cold and brittle, but what they found instead was unsettling. Two figures lay side by side, wrapped in thick linen threaded with gold. The wrappings were fused together, and the funerary masks had melted into the fabric, their outlines barely visible. Between the two bodies was a bronze cylinder. It was positioned perfectly between their arms, like a shared possession. Every few moments, it emitted a faint vibration that could be felt through the granite itself. The rhythm matched the same 42-second pulse recorded across the entire site. As the lights adjusted, the team began their examination. The male body was partially decomposed, but the damage did not look natural. His chest cavity had been opened intentionally, ribs bent outward, the heart cavity filled with solidified resin streaked with mercury. The act was not preservation, it was ritual. According to reports, some believed it was a form of sealing, a way to contain whatever force the body once carried. The female body was better preserved than the male, though time had still taken its toll. The wrappings were thick and stiff, hardened into a shell that held the shape of what once lay inside. Under the lights, the surface glowed with a dull bronze hue, uneven and cracked from age. Through the folds, small glints of gold and silver appeared. A brooch near the upper chest, a clasp lower along the torso, and a pendant pressed flat against the linen where the heart would have been. It was shaped like a woman with outstretched wings. Martinez leaned closer and recognized it immediately. It was the figure of Isis, the goddess Cleopatra claimed as her divine reflection. Then they noticed something else. Around the woman's wrist was a bracelet molded into the form of a cobra, its fangs bared and head raised. The metal was blackened, yet the shape was unmistakable. For the Egyptians, the cobra was both protector and bringer of death, the same creature said to have ended Cleopatra's life. The chamber fell silent. According to reports, Martinez whispered only 2 words when she saw it. "It's her." Tests conducted later confirmed that both mummies belonged to individuals of high status. DNA sequencing revealed markers consistent with the Ptolemaic bloodline, supporting the claim that they were royal. By the time the team sealed the chamber for safety, the air had grown heavy and metallic. The floor beneath the sarcophagus gave off low heat, and faint tremors ran through the walls. One researcher described the feeling as standing near an active engine. Another refused to re-enter the room, saying the air felt alive. The excavation that had begun with excitement now felt like trespass. According to reports, Martinez herself stood in silence before the open sarcophagus, her face pale under the work lights. "We wanted answers," she said quietly, "but this feels like punishment." The discovery confirmed everything they had hoped for and everything they feared. The tomb of Cleopatra had finally been found, but what rested inside did not feel at peace. The sarcophagus had given answers and birthed new terror. Yet the true horror was not what lay inside it. It was what surrounded it. The circle of the dead. Beyond the sarcophagus, the passage tightened and bent sharply to the right. The team advanced inch by inch, lights steady, respirators sealed. The corridor finally opened into a circular chamber, its walls carved with shallow recesses. Inside each alcove sat a single skull, placed upright on a stone shelf, all of them staring toward the center of the room. There were no bodies, no coffins, only skulls. They counted 36 in total, 12 male, 12 female, and 12 belonging to children. The discovery stopped everyone cold. Dust drifted through the beams of their lamps. The chamber was silent. Each skull's eye sockets were coated with a fine layer of gold powder that glittered under the light. Later, bone samples revealed traces of blue lotus resin, the same substance found in the embalming area. Field notes described the effect with unsettling clarity. These skulls had been prepared with care. They were not discarded remains. Every skull faced a low stone platform at the center of the chamber. Carved into its surface was the Ankh, the ancient Egyptian symbol of life. Resting on top were two small bronze cups, fused together by intense heat. One still held a thin crust of blackened residue that later tested positive for human blood. Above the alcoves ran a single inscription, written in both Greek and Egyptian. It read, "They guard the passage and keep the balance." Some archaeologists interpreted it as a prayer to Isis, guardian of the underworld. Others believed it was something far more disturbing, a warning. Not that the dead were at rest, but that they were actively restraining something beneath the chamber. The arrangement was precise. Every skull was missing its lower jaw. Forensic specialists later concluded this was intentional, a method of decapitation designed to prevent reconstruction. The message was unmistakable. Whatever this circle was meant to contain, it was never meant to be released. As sensors were deployed, the monitors began to react. Low electromagnetic spikes surged through the room, rising and falling every 42 seconds. The same rhythm that had followed the team since their first day in the desert. Crew members reported a pressure behind their eyes, a metallic buzz on their tongues. Dr. Martinez stepped across the threshold and froze. She tasted metal. She immediately ordered the chamber sealed. Her final recorded words, before the signal abruptly cut, were chilling. "This is not a tomb. It is a mechanism made of death." Within hours, news of the chamber spread through academic circles and government offices. Images leaked onto private forums before the site was placed under full lockdown. Reactions were swift and divided. Some demanded the chambers be sealed permanently, others pushed for complete public disclosure. A smaller group asked a far darker question. If the circle was functional and the skulls were placed to maintain balance, then what had been altered by opening the passage? The implications, the consequences stretched far beyond the site itself. If the 36 were guardians, then Cleopatra's burial was not merely ceremonial, it was engineered. The inscriptions emphasized balance. The recurring pulse matched numbers associated with judgment in Egyptian belief. Nothing appeared accidental. Several researchers concluded the structure had been designed as a living system, one meant to operate long after the rituals were complete. That realization unsettled even the skeptics. Perhaps Cleopatra was more than the figure described by Roman historians. Some believe she created a tomb that could never be looted without consequence. Others go further, suggesting she built a warning that still responds when disturbed. If Cleopatra designed her burial as a weapon instead of a shrine, what do you think she was protecting? Her legacy or something far greater? Share your theory in the comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.